Artificial intelligence, it's going to take our jobs. But of course, we've heard that before. When we just find something else to do, and could that mean AI is good for growth and GDP will never look better or not? Today, we map out the impact of AI and what we can do about it. Or should we just embrace it? That's today on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Well, artificial intelligence is everywhere, it seems, except perhaps in Parliament, where there's not a lot intelligence.
Or natural, for that matter.
But a lot of artificiality there, perhaps.
That's true. You got the first half right.
But AI, as it's called, is helping us drive our Tesla cars. It's answering our questions masquerading under the name of Alexis or Siri. It's providing customer support services. It's driving all of us along that function of, on Amazon, if you like this, then you're probably going to like this. And all that
just after you bought a chair, they give you all the advertisements for chairs. I really enjoy that.
It's even, well, no, I mean, it's a bit smarter than that, isn't it? If you bought a chair, it says, well, maybe
you need cushions.
Cushions, or you need a book to read on it or whatever. And it's figuring out how we heat our homes, but this is just, of course, the tip of the iceberg. So is it just adding value? Or will it take our jobs away? Steve, it has to take our jobs away, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this is, if you look at, for example, how many jobs do we have in agriculture these days, the answer is almost none. I think the percentage of the population that actually works actively in agriculture these days in most advanced economies is of the order of 1% of the population. If you go back 150 years or 200 years, it's 70% of the population, something of that scale. So what happens, those jobs disappear, but other ones are created. Yeah. And this has always been the argument that any technology will lead to new industries which replace old industries. So people displaced from the old industries find jobs in the new industries. And that's, generally speaking, that's been correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a long-term trend. But if you look at,
does it also create more jobs, though? So the argument for the World Economic Forum from a couple of years ago, they said robots are going to displace 75 million jobs globally by 2022, but create 133 million new ones because we'll need more data analysts or data analysts, more software developers. They say social media specialists. Do we really need more of those? But I guess, if we've got the smarts that's enabling us to do more, then potentially it could create more jobs.
Well, it's also partly what skills are necessary to take the jobs which are displaced by these new technologies. And if you go back to the original person arguing for a form of displacement over time, it's sort of Marx in a way, because he argued that as capitalism developed, there'd be an increase in the ratio of machinery to labour, and that because he believed labour was the source of all profit, then there'd be a decline in the rate of profit. And this is one of the many wrong-headed notions in Marx that was fallacious, and it talked about dividing society into two opposing classes. So there's some beautiful phraseology in the Communist Manifesto, which if I had a copy here, I could quickly look
I thought you always had a copy in your back pocket.
Yeah, right? That's true. Yeah, the red flag that I carry around all the time. Yeah, but it was a statement about how capitalism reduces just sort of desanctifies all professions. Everything gets reduced to a lowest common denominator, and you get divided into an extreme class, the bourgeoisie, who are incredibly wealthy, and a proletariat that's incredibly poor. And what actually happened instead over the following how long is it now? 1874, so coming up to 150 years. Over the 150-year period, what you have is an enormous expansion in the bureaucracy. Because to manage these capitalist enterprises and to manage the state as well, you needed a huge number of people carrying out clerical jobs. And the scale of middle management is enormous. Any capitalist organisation.
They are those jobs that would disappear. I mean, that administrative function is going to. So 150 years on. I mean, he might be right. Perhaps.
Because if you think about back, but partly there's this whole question of a hierarchy too, by the way, which I really want to keep in mind, because I'm a great fan of the work of Blair Fix, and Blair has given a brilliant explanation for one of the sources of inequality, particularly the high wages of CEOs compared to workers. So CEOs earning north of 100 million a year type levels is not because they're that productive. It's because they're in a hierarchy. And if you just imagine having a triangle and you start with a very small firm, you've got one boss and two employees, and then you expand it and you've got one boss and two vice presidents who have 2 employees each,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And as it expands, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the enormous salaries occur at the apex of the triangle, and the triangle's incredibly broad.
And then you've got the whole middle management who do nothing at all except look after their jobs.
So what's actually happening with a lot of AI is going to eliminate that middle management.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is one of the 2 things which
So is it going to be the middle management, or is it going to be the people at the bottom? Or it's going to be a bit of both, isn't it, really?
Yeah, well, the robots are the people at the bottom.
Yeah.
Kind of like, and that's one thing that Musk has learnt to his cost initially, that we're not anywhere near at the point where robots can take over all those functions. So, there's one fascinating article in the New York Times that I used as part of a paper of mine in the Journal of Ecological Economics on the role of energy in production. And that was an interview with a small town with an air conditioning manufacturing business. And they were interviewing the people about the jobs they had. And one woman there, her job was to insert a tweezer-like device into each of the air conditioning units as it went past. And what that tweezer-like device was effectively a temperature measurement. Okay, that it would expand and contract, and that would tell you what heat levels are being put through the machine.
I bet she was really good at it after a while.
But she said, you don't have to like your job to get paid. That was her. Okay. But my point was, if it was worth the while of the firm to make a robot which could put that tweezer in there,
they would have done it.
They would have done it. The thing is, it's such a trivial part of the overall manufacturing process. But at the same time, to get a robot to do it is incredibly complicated. So the investment costs just weren't worth it.
Right.
So consequently, that's the human job.
But that will change, won't it?
That will change, because when you get to the stage of robots which have all the neural network software, which is part of what AI is actually about, who can look at something using visual sensors and realize that's where the tweezer has to go. And if the machine is 1 millimeter, if when it stops, it's just 1 millimeter out of alignment, then currently a robot will try to insert the tweezer through the outside metal, which won't work. But one which got the intelligence to say, well, the actual object I'm supposed to insert it to has moved to here. That's the point where the thing needs to go in. Then I put it inside there. And then when you redesign the air conditioning unit and it moves 10 centimeters, the robot can be shown this, look at it, this is what you're trying to find, that's where you put it. So it's the flexibility of human mind.
Yeah, even for something that seems relatively simple,
it's
like
incredibly complicated.
But I'm sure she doesn't see it as complicated. I'm sure she's bored stupid with her
that's
jobs.
Right. You're thinking of some other thing at the time as you're doing it. You get into automatic mode. And the thing is, to get robots to the stage where they can have that degree of flexibility is incredibly complicated. And you've got to have people doing. They used to call them CNC, computer controlled numerical. I forgot what the actual initials, but computer-controlled numerical systems. And you had to have a programmer to reprogram every time. And that's a huge amount of work. And often with a tiny task in a manufacturing process, it simply isn't worth it. So Musk tried to totally automate the Tesla factories and then found that some things like placing the seats inside the car was just too damn difficult for robots to get it right. Yeah. So back to humans again.
That's going to change, of course. So if you want to hear more of this discussion with Professor Steve Keen, that's just the first 8 minutes or so of what's a half-hour discussion on artificial intelligence. You need to subscribe, and you can do that by going to debunkingeconomics.com and choosing one of the subscription plans on that website, or become a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen. Once you've done that, you can hear the whole half hour of this and 200 or more other podcasts that we've recorded together, and we keep on adding them every week. Hopefully we'll see you back here again next week for another one. I'm Phil Dobbie. He's Steve Keen. Thanks for listening.